Hey guys, it's Sarah. Thank you so much for watching. So today I wanted to do a video talking about my favorite and least favorite shades in all of my eyeshadow palettes. So I believe it was Georgia Harris and Spooky Lips and Fat Hips who started this little fun video topic, and since then a lot of people have kind of jumped on. I think they started with a video talking about their favorite shade in the palette, and then since then people have done favorite shade in the palette, least favorite shade in the palette. I'm just going to combine both into one video. We're going to go through all 9 of the eyeshadow palettes that I own. I have 5 high-end palettes and 4 drugstore palettes. And I'm going to go through and talk about my favorite and least favorite shades in these palettes. With some of these palettes, I don't necessarily have a least favorite shade, but I do have a least used shade. So, you know, it'll kind of vary. I'm gonna kind of alternate between high-end and drugstore. Let's start with my Nude Dude palette from theBalm. This is technically considered a high-end palette. This is actually, I think, my oldest palette that I own. This is the one I've had the longest. It's made it through lots of declutters. I would say that my favorite shade in this palette for sure is the shade Flirty. This is just a really unique shade because it's kind of a lavender purple with gold shimmer in it. I just think that shade is really unique. I don't have really anything else like it in my collection, and I just think it's beautiful. It's really pretty to use for a one shadow look because it has that extra dimension to it with the gold shimmer. So that's definitely my favorite shade, always has been. It's definitely the most used shade as well. I think I'm really close to hitting pan on that one. I would say that my least favorite shade is tied for both Fierce and Fine. Those are the two shades over here at the end. Fierce is kind of like a greenish black. I don't know. I don't really use black shadow that often anyway. And then Fine is just kind of like a murky brown with a little shimmer to it. Both of those shades are ones that I can use. I might use them just kind of to smudge them on the lower lash line or in the outer corner, but I just don't, like, looking at those two shades doesn't really make me very happy. I'm kind of like, eh, like I could definitely do without those. If those two shades were left out of this palette, I think I would be perfectly fine with that. Now onto a drugstore palette. This is probably the palette that I have the least experience with in my collection. It's the Covergirl Trunaked Roses palette. This is pretty new to my collection and I've only used it a couple times. This is a really pretty palette for just a very soft, mauve-y, rosy look. None of these shadows are super pigmented, but that's kind of not really what this palette is meant for, I guess. I think it's just meant for like a nice, easy, light wash of color. I would actually say that my favorite shade is this really, really light pastel lavender. I guess you would call that a lavender. I actually really like that shade as light as it is as a transition shade in the crease. I have fair enough skin to be able to use it for that, but I just think it's really pretty, and it's nice when I don't want a super defined eye look and I just want to like throw something really light in the crease. That's an interesting shade. I like that one, and I think in general I really do like, I really do tend to like pastel colors, especially matte pastel shadows. So that one's really pretty. That's probably my favorite if I had to choose one so far. And then I think I would say that my least favorite shade is this one all the way here at the end. It's just kind of a dark plummy purple, but it's one of those shadows, and you'll hear this again in this video. This is a pet peeve of mine with dark shadows, when technically it's a color, but the base of it is just black and it has like shimmer mixed into it, but the base is still black, so when you blend it onto the eye, it's just gonna look dark. It's not really gonna look true to color. So that would probably be my least favorite shade. I generally don't like those dark shades that are kind of just like they're just dark. They're not really a rich color. I like rich, dark colors, but I don't like when it's just like a deep, dark, grayish charcoal black. Like, that's not really my thing. The next one is gonna be the Norvina palette. This is the newest one to me of all the ABH palettes. Hard to pick. Well, I know my least favorite. My least favorite is Drama. This actually is very similar to that dark purple shade in the CoverGirl palette that I just talked about. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just a deep kind of eggplant purple, really pretty color in the pan, but the base of that shadow is just black, and it just kind of has that purple shimmer mixed throughout it. At least I think that's how it's made. So it just ends up looking black or dark. It's not, that really is a huge pet peeve of mine with eyeshadows. It just looks and feels low quality to me. The texture of the shadow is kind of dry on its own, and it looks absolutely gorgeous in the pan. Like, it looks like a beautiful, deep, like eggplant purple. But if you look at the swatch and if you apply it to the eye, it's just like a dark shade. It's not true to color. It bums me out when a shade looks beautiful in the pan, but it doesn't look that way on the eye. It is hard to pick a favorite shade in this palette because a lot of these shades are absolutely beautiful, but I think that my favorite shade would have to actually be Dazzling. It's the one just immediately to the left of Drama. It's such a unique shade. It doesn't look like anything all that different in the pan. It just kind of looks like a really, really glittery taupe, but it has so much dimension to it. It has so many different tones all going on in there. It's just beautiful. So I can kind of look past how chunky it is and how much fallout it has because it's such a beautiful shade, and I definitely don't have a shade in my collection that is that intense and that beautiful in that kind of a way. So that's probably my favorite shade in the palette. This next palette is really just a quad, so it's not like a big palette, but this is just like an old school favorite makeup product. This is a product that I've repurchased because the old one I completely used up, which is insane to me. Like, I never use up eyeshadow, but this is the Wet n Wild Walking on Eggshells quad. It used to be a trio, now it's a quad. I personally think that the new formula is pretty much just as good as the old one. I think I don't notice a huge difference, and I like that now it has a matte transition shade. I think that my favorite shade in this quad would be the light shimmery pink, which they call the eyelid shade. I just remember even when, this is one of the first makeup products I ever owned. I had it all the way back in high school, the old one of course, and that was like my favorite shade ever to wear on my lid. I've always loved just like a light, rosy, champagne-y pink shade on my lid. That's just always been my favorite kind of a go-to neutral look, and so that's probably my favorite. I think I'm really close to hitting pan on that. I think my least favorite shade is probably the crease shade, the brown. Not that it's bad, I really don't dislike that shade, but of the four, it's probably my least favorite, just because I feel like it could just be a little bit more buttery and maybe a little bit more pigmented. It doesn't pack a ton of punch, which I think is okay because this palette isn't really meant to give you like a deep, dark, smoky look. This is just kind of your everyday, like, getting ready for work or school or whatever. Like, this is just a great go-to neutral palette. The next palette is the one I'm wearing on my eyes right now. This is the Anastasia Subculture palette. This palette, I cannot figure out how I feel about it because I absolutely love the color story of this. I mean, it's so beautiful, and it's just such a creative mix of colors, but at the same time, this color story really intimidates me because it does lean so dark, and sometimes when I look at it, I just don't know where to begin. I feel like this is an example of a product that the idea and the concept was great, but the execution just wasn't. And some of these shadows really are extremely difficult to work with. Some of them, like some of these shimmers, well, all three of the shimmers in here, pretty much hard pan immediately after you put a brush in them, or your finger, whatever. As soon as you touch them, they're hard panned. Like, that's it. And I mean, you can still use them, you just kind of have to really dig in there, but there's just no getting past that hard pan. But anyway, as far as just the colors go and not taking into account the formula, I think I have two favorite shades. One is Electric. It's like a green gold, beautiful shade. I have that in my inner corner right now. Really pretty and so unique. But again, just the hard pan drives me insane. It's just so chunky. I just wish that I could actually, it's so hard to pick it up on your brush, but when you get it on the eye, it's beautiful. And then my other favorite shade in here is Axis. I have that one smudged on the lower lash line right now, kind of over the top of the ColourPop liner in Fast Lane. But yeah, those, as far as just the colors go, those two are my favorite. I think my least favorite shade in this palette, unfortunately, is the shade Destiny. I love the idea of a beautiful, like, matte army green, but whenever I wear this on my eye, it just makes me look sick. And it just looks ugly on me. Like, I'm sure it looks beautiful on some people, but I cannot get that shade to look good on me. And I want it to look good, like, I really do, but whenever I've tried to use it, oh, it just looks so bad on me. I need to figure out a way to maybe make it a little bit more wearable. The other shade in here that's kind of the same thing is Edge. It's like a mustard yellow, but not just any mustard yellow. It's like a almost artificial looking mustard yellow. And that one too, kind of the same as Destiny. It just does not look flattering on me at all. Yeah, just to let you know the shades I have on right now, I have Adorn all over the lid. It's like a shimmery bronze, again with the hard pan. It's not as bad as Electric and Cube, but it's still hard pan. And then I have All Star in the outer corner. I have Dawn in the crease as a transition color. That shade right there is a really good blending color for the crease. And what else? Electric in the inner corner, which is beautiful, but just hard to work with, and then Axis smudged on the lower lash line. So yeah, overall, I have very mixed feelings on this palette, but I still really like it, and I love the overall concept of it. So I don't think it's something I'd ever declutter, just because it's, I don't know, it's cool to me. Like, I just enjoy having it. And when I do wear it, I can get, like today, I love the look that I got today. I'm actually, oh, I also forgot to say, I'm actually wearing Cube as a cheekbone highlight, which is a really fun, it's like a duochrome white pink. Really pretty as a cheekbone highlight. We'll say that. Next palette is a drugstore palette. This is the Milani Bold Obsessions palette. I see a lot of people saying that this palette is like amazing quality, and it is good quality, especially for the drugstore. It really does, packaging wise, remind me of those Stila eyeshadow palettes. But not every shade in here is like amazing, phenomenal quality. My favorite, that's hard. I know what my most used shade is. It's this one right here. This is called Bear in Mind. That is one of those shades that I always just throw in the crease just to get the crease started. It's the most used, not necessarily unique or like my favorite color ever, but like it's probably the most useful for me. I think my favorite shade in the palette is Blazing Hot, which is this really metallic kind of orangey copper shade. That one is really nice and buttery and like almost as intense as the metallics in the Norvina palette, but not as much fallout and not as flaky. So I really think they did a great job on that shade. It's not a shade that I'd wear every day, obviously, because it's just like really intense. I mean, it's like a super orangey copper, but it is gorgeous, and that probably is my favorite shade in the palette, partly because of its uniqueness and partly because the formula and the color are beautiful as well. Now, my least favorite shade in this palette is probably a tie between these two right here. This whole row right here is kind of more cool tones, and unfortunately I just don't like these two. These are the shades Slate All Day and Smoke Signals. I'm holding it upside down, I hope you don't mind. But Slate All Day, this would be nice. It's just kind of dry and like not as buttery as I would like it to be. And when I swatch it or when I wear it on the eye, I just feel like it doesn't do much. Like, I want more from that shade. I want it to be more opaque. It's just kind of sheer and like patchy and just kind of like blah. I don't know, it's just not very good. It could have been good. Like, I like the way that it looks in the pan, just not the way that it performs. And then this shade right here too, this is kind of the same, I have the same feelings about it. It's the shade Smoke Signals. It's like a beautiful like gunmetal bluish shade, but again, it's one of those annoying shades that just has a blackish gray base, and it doesn't actually look the way that it looks in the pan on the eyes. Like, I would love for that to be just a gorgeous like navy, like shimmery navy blue shade almost, or like almost a denim blue, but it just looks gray. Just looks gray on the eyes. If I wanted a gray eyeshadow, I would just reach for a gray eyeshadow. Like, I don't, like, I had such high hopes for that shade and it really let me down. But I do really love like everything else except those two shades. So just be aware of that. It is a $20 palette, which is kind of pricey for the drugstore. You can get it for $15 at Walmart, I think. So if you are gonna get it, I would recommend trying to get it from Walmart. The next palette I have is one of my all-time favorites, the Soft Glam palette. This is just my ideal neutral palette, and I think all the other people that love it feel the same way about it. I can tell you my favorite shades, it's probably a tie, once again, between Glistening and Dusty Rose. Dusty Rose is like a mauve-y lavender matte shade that I love to put in the crease. I love that kind of a shade in the crease. And then I also love the shade Glistening. It's kind of the slightly more pinkish gold. Oh, that shade is just so pretty. It's like a softer shimmer, but it still has so much dimension to it. Yeah, I don't have a least favorite shade. I absolutely cannot pick. Maybe Noir, just because it's a matte black, and that's probably the one that I use the least. But that's not to say it's bad. It's actually the best matte black shadow I have in my collection, but it would be my least used at least, so I'll say that for this one. I do love this palette. Next, this is the last drugstore palette I own, is the e.l.f. Opposites Attract palette. This is probably the newest one to my collection. In fact, it definitely is. I have been having so much fun with this palette. This actually has a lot of shades similar to a lot of the ones in Subculture, but it has a lot more variety to it. Like, there's, you know, bright purples in here. There's just a lot more shades in here. This has what, 6 times 3, 18 shades. So this is actually the biggest palette I own as well. Okay, this is gonna be hard. I actually have to be honest, I have not used every single shade in this palette on my eyes. I have swatched all of them, but I haven't used the shade Happy or Saucy. Those might be the only 2 I haven't used. Oh, and Bold. I don't think I've used Bold. So it's hard to say for sure since I haven't used every single shade yet, but so far, I think that my favorite shade might be Daring. This shade really surprised me because to me it doesn't really look like much in the pan, but on the eyes it has a lot going on. Like it almost looks more plummy on the eyes, and I really like that shade. It's really nice and pigmented without being powdery at all. In fact, none of the shades in this palette are too powdery, which is nice if you're not a fan of like super powdery shadows like the Anastasia palettes are. That is probably my favorite shade so far, but I like pretty much every shade in here that I've tried. It's also hard for me to pick a least favorite shade in here, but I think I would say that Spicy is my least favorite just because it's very just bronzy. Like I kind of wish it was a little bit more gold and less bronzy and less warm, because a lot of times that kind of a bronzy gold shade or like an old gold shade just ends up making my eyes look really red. It's actually kind of like what I have on my eyes right now from the Subculture palette, but it's probably my least favorite. It's not to say it's bad, it is a nice shadow and it's pigmented, but once again, it's hard. Like I don't really dislike any of the shades in here, at least that I've tried so far, so that's that one. Last but not least, we have the iconic Modern Renaissance palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills. Okay, so I think that my favorite shade in this palette is Red Ochre. This is the kind of shade that could have gone very badly because it's really like a deep burnt red. This is the kind of shade that could have just turned out looking like this in the pan, but brown on the eyes, you know what I mean? But it looks so true to color on the eyes, just like such a rich, deep red. It's beautiful. I love that shade in the outer corner paired with Primavera, which is the gold in here. So I just love that shade. I also love both of the like more fuchsia magenta colors in here. They're both gorgeous. I love just how rich those shades are. Like they nailed it with this one. I think that my least favorite shade, or at least my least used shade in the palette, is Real Gar. Is that even how you say that? I don't know. It's just this matte orange shade. It's really orange, and I think that's just why I don't use it very much, is because, I don't know, I don't think orange shadow is like the most flattering on me. Not to say it's a bad shadow, but that's definitely the one I've used out of here the least. Like even just looking at the shadow, I maybe have used that like twice. But maybe I should experiment with it more. Like I'm sure I could come up with some really nice looks with it. It's just really intense and really orange, and that's not necessarily the kind of shade I go for all the time. But I mean, this has been one of my favorite palettes like ever since I got it. I love this palette. So that's it for my favorite and least favorite shades in all of my eyeshadow palettes. I feel like I have a ton of variety here between all of these. I mean, I've got so many different types of color stories right here, and I don't know, when I look at my stack of eyeshadow palettes, it makes me really happy, so I guess that's a good thing. But anyway, that's my eyeshadow palette collection. That's kind of my thoughts on all of them. Not only sharing, I guess this kind of turned into like mini reviews on all of my palettes too, so hopefully this was at least entertaining to watch, if not maybe a little bit helpful. But if you did enjoy, I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel. I make lots of videos about shopping your stash using the makeup that you already have, project panning, and everything that I use is cruelty-free, so I'd love to have you stick around for future videos. But that's it for today. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.